Hey everyone, I'm Stefan. So founder of Laguna Labs, and I'm super happy to be here and today to be talking with Vahid Toosi, who is the founder of HODL, which is a publicly listed entity focused on crypto. Hey Vahid.
Hey, nice to be here.
Yeah, no, it's like super cool. So Vahid and I, we basically go back what some 5, 7 years, I think, in crypto
Yeah,
land, which is like
yeah,
super long, right? It's
I know, right?
it's really good
Yeah, we
fun.
met on a boat.
On a
Yeah,
boat,
we
yeah,
met on
exactly,
yeah, we
exactly.
met on a boat on the Swedish archipelago, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
It
then
was,
we
it was, it was. Who was there was some launch, right? It was some
it was
launch. I can't remember
Ivan
what it
on
was.
Tech. Ivan on Tech was hosting a like kind of like a conference, and we met on the boat and we hit it off, and yeah, rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
definitely history, and we've always been in touch, right? We did a lot of work. We even tried to work together on a couple of projects, and we did. I finally find a couple of sweet spots together, and
Mm.
yeah, I'm a proud investor in HODL.
I also
Maybe,
advisor.
yeah, maybe you, yeah, and Ivan is too, right? So you got a whole bunch of good people. Maybe share a bit about the experience and how you came to HODL and why. What was the genesis behind that, and how you pulled together these great set group of people to help you in that launch and that journey?
Yeah, of course. So HODL SPAC is, as you mentioned, it's a publicly traded company. It's
Yeah,
basically it was me and a bunch of friends where I kept getting approached by a lot of TradFi folks talking about, how do we get exposure? How do we get exposure? And we should start a fund. I mean, ever since the bull market
yeah,
2018, I guess everyone's kind of wanting to start a fund and blah blah blah. But then, this last bull market, whether we're in it or not, still, it was kind of a bit different. Everyone, like a real more traditional folks reached out, and so I was just basically having a dinner with a few friends that are from that world, and we said, why don't we just do something, a SPAC? We know I have the knowledge from the crypto space. They were very TradFi space. And we said, yeah, let's try to do it. It's fun to have a SPAC called HODL SPAC. And it would be the first kind of European SPAC that's focused on blockchain and crypto. So we thought, yeah, why not? It would be a fun thing to do. Well, we'll have we can do it with our friends, and we get to meet a lot of interesting companies and can kind of get a sense of what's happening in the traditional equity market, but for blockchain companies. So we thought, yeah, why not? So we listed it, and yeah, and then we're now looking for companies to acquire.
and so from that perspective, right? You look back and you've been in crypto, or particularly, one of the lead investors in building up EOS, and sort of really not investors but actually builders. And you look at now from all the crypto up, sort of you've lived in and breathed crypto for so long, and now you're entering into sort of the TradFi space. How do you find that sort of whole sort of transition and now dealing with TradFi requirements? How did you find that navigating that whole journey?
Well, I would say the whole journey and the whole experience of the TradFi and the listing and all the kind of like
Yeah,
compliance and regulations and all of that made me realize we need DeFi and crypto badly. I mean,
yeah,
it's so outdated. I mean, some
yeah,
stuff were just like you need to physically fill in a form, and it was just not great. Even though we did in like less than 3 months, which I think is some
yeah.
sort
It's
of
super quick.
it was
Yeah.
super quick. I mean, but still, it's because we've done a few of these before, not SPACs, but like listings. So we had the experience, but still, I mean, it's just too complicated. But I mean, I wouldn't say I'm moving away from crypto or blockchain. I would definitely say this is kind of looking at the TradFi space and trying to get them on board to this rather than the other way around. Because I mean, there's no real reason to leave this space now because like this,
Yeah.
it hasn't even started properly. So yeah, that's kind of where
Yeah,
my
I think
head.
one of the things that we talk about it, and as well, I mean, is well, I look at Sweden or Scandinavia, right? The whole world sort of sees Scandinavia or Sweden as a real innovator, right? Cutting edge, right? We got really great companies coming out of Skype came out, or the founders of Skype came out of there. We've got Spotify, you've got IKEA, right? So always innovating both in supply chain as well as from a
Mhm.
technology perspective. So it's interesting to see that even in things like TradFi, it's still not necessarily as innovative as one would think, right? So that
Mhm.
whole legacy industry is still built up on processes and regulations and frameworks that have been set up in the 19th, a century ago, maybe even, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely true. I mean, we do have these huge, I mean, we have these huge Web2 companies as well that are kind
Yeah,
of like, the Spotify, the Klarna, the Candy Crush of the world. So
yeah, yeah,
we have a lot of them. It's some fun statistics is that Sweden's about 10 million people,
yeah,
Europe's around 500 million people, but we
yeah,
have 50% of the unicorn companies in Europe are Swedish. So, I mean, we're really good at building unicorns here in Sweden. I think it's
yeah,
because we have the like global mindset because the market is too small, so we
yeah,
can't really build just for the Swedish market. We have to build with the world in mind. And so I was also I guess also the kind of like the language barrier. A lot of Swedes get to they're taught English early on in school, and it builds kind of
yeah,
like a culture that you there is an entrepreneurship culture. The challenge, I would say, is that those kind of Web2 companies have been so successful and they've all kind of been on, vesting programs with their employees and like there's this, which has created a lot of fat and happy people. So
yeah,
the last generation were all kind of on
yeah,
these vesting programs. Why would they leave their very, very high paid job at Spotify to
yeah,
move over to Web3? So I would say, I mean, now I'm super excited about these younger, early 20s developers that can't just, join Spotify and get hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stock options and stuff. They now to need to create their own future. And I
yeah.
think a lot of them are kind of go to Web 2 when I can do Web 3 stuff.
Right.
So for that reason, I'm very excited. But I do think that Sweden has kind of fallen behind in the blockchain space. I do think it's kind of like,
Interesting.
I remember traveling around in China 2017, 18, and like
Yeah,
everyone was talking about, the different protocols. You were kind of like uh, comparing consensus models and like what's the next chain, yada yada yada. Well, we're like here in Sweden, we barely knew what Bitcoin was. So um, we do have a bit of catching up to do, I would say.
and why do you think that is? I mean, last time I was in Sweden, we had we were at the conference, and I was lucky enough to be a speaker at that conference or on the panel,
Yeah.
and there was a huge audience there in an incubation facility in a
Mm,
joint co-working space. A lot of
mm,
young people,
mm.
entrepreneurs, and a big interest in largely Bitcoin community or Bitcoin Cash or crypto, sort of traditional crypto community versus the sort of new proof of stake work
Yeah.
environments, right?
Yeah.
But why do you think they haven't transitioned into sort of Web3?
Um, Good question. I think maybe that year was kind of like a starting year for the crypto adventure here in the Nordics, where people kind of like you. I mean, you always kind of like you move to Bitcoin, and then you find your
Yeah,
Ethereum, and then you find the Ethereum killers, and then you find the altcoins, and then you kind of your flavor gets more and more exotic as you
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
go down the rabbit hole. But then after a while, you realize, you know what, I might actually go because you start thinking about the fundamentals and like network effects might matter and stuff like that. So maybe now we're back where the audience are kind of shifting back towards the top 20 coins or the top
Yeah.
20 protocols or blockchains, and they're like, okay, let's build something slightly more long term. Let's not just go for the next 100x coin. So maybe that it started then 2017, 18, and now we're kind of seeing the results of it. Because I mean, you do have Ivan on Tech,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
he's running a very successful company,
Mora-
Morales, which
Morales,
is
yeah.
kind of, I mean, which is a year old, but since he was kind of he was hosting the conference that we went to, and I'm sure he inspired a lot of people to build stuff. So I don't know. I think we're on our way, but it's been pretty slow, to be honest.
Interesting,
So
yeah, because it's like there are a lot of innovate. I mean, you got Ivan on Tech, as you mentioned. You have Christian Ander, who launched the
yeah,
exchange there. You have
yeah,
Safello,
yeah,
Frank,
yeah,
who's launched a
yeah,
big
yeah,
exchange.
yeah.
I mean, you've been a huge innovator in terms of trying to bring payments and innovation on top of EOS.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of data centers, right? So a lot of the validator nodes and data centers
True.
where ETH is mined or Bitcoin is mined are all up in Scandinavia as well, right? So
Mm.
there has been a tradition in doing that, and maybe it's just the next generation that needs to come into this and realize, ooh, now Web3 is a politically correct, good name. It's not
Yeah,
tarnished by Bitcoin or
exactly.
cryptocurrencies, right? So
I mean,
now it's like it's a
honestly,
tech.
yeah, the dude or the dudette that came up with the word or the framing of Web3 instead of crypto or blockchain should get a Nobel Prize in marketing. Seriously. I mean,
Yeah,
now if you mention cryptos to someone, still some people are like, oh, no, that's just for drug dealers and
yeah, exactly.
anti-sanction stuff. But like Web3, people are embracing it, and
Yeah.
yeah, that person needs to get some sort of prize, definitely. So yeah,
Yeah, and I
the,
think Web3 is like it's such a big, broad terminology, right? And it includes anything from blockchain itself to the actual cryptocurrencies
yeah,
through to DeFi and includes NFTs, Metaverse, etc. And I think you're working on some really interesting projects around NFTs and have some interesting domains, right? I mean, maybe do you
yeah,
want to shed some light on sort of
yeah,
your ideas and what you're trying to do with NFTs?
yeah, of course. So we have a project with the working name Nifty Nordics, where we're
Yeah.
trying to basically onboard people from the Web 2 world onto the Web 3 world and anything that
Yeah.
comes with it. Because I own the domains nft.se, .dk, .fi, and .no, which are the
Wow.
Scandinavian domains. So we
They
thought, why
must be
not
worth
use,
a lot, right? Just alone
yeah,
the domain names.
yeah, actually, nft.fi has got a lot of it's dot finance, right?
Yeah.
So people are like, someone actually made a bid, and I'm like, why would you want Scandinavian domains? And like, they want the dot fi one. Uh, so
Interesting.
anyway, so we thought, why not kind of with the community that we do have and the kind of the people we know, why don't we build a kind of onboarding ramp to the Web3 world and using the Web2 assets like the domains are. So we have this idea of kind of just educating, informing, and then onboarding people into this space, and kind of hold their hand while they're trying to get on this adventure. I think it's a fun thing to do because you kind of you need to go into regulations, compliance,
Yeah.
GDPR. You need to do all those kind of stuff. And while you're doing it, you're
Yeah,
also
yeah.
educating, you're educating the IRS, you're educating the legislators. You're kind of like it's a very interesting conversation to have actually, because
Interesting.
so that's fun. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, I think with NFTs, it has created a stronger emotional attachment beyond just financial towards crypto and Web3, if you will, right? And so all of a sudden, people can see a picture, they can see an image, and they can see how that then manifests itself into being on a Web3. It can be all the features and benefits that you have from Web3 or crypto are now in an image that allows me to have an ape as an image, or have a gorilla or a tiger or whatever it is that you want to have as an
Yeah.
NFT.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I also think this is something you and I have talked about as
yeah,
well, and I think it's kind of like the more evolved the NFTs get, I think the more utility they will get, and the
yes,
more utility they get, you have utility either in the virtual world or the physical world. If you just want to be in the virtual world, well, then the utility could be global.
yeah,
But if you want to be in the physical world, well, then it has to be local, or at least, I mean, if NFTs are used as, let's say, reward programs for a coffee shop or whatever, I'm not a really, I mean, if I get a free coffee in Korea tomorrow, that's not going to make my life any nicer. But if I get one here in Stockholm, well, then that's nice. So I think the more utility we add to the NFTs, the more local it will get. So we think it's important to kind of, have that local representation of NFTs, and kind of like, I mean, NFTs are a possibility to kind of like transfer culture, transfer ownership, transfer something. And I do think language is important in that sense. How do you interpret the culture and create an NFT out of it? Or like, there's a lot of artists here in Sweden that are just Swedish. They're not like, they don't have a fan base outside of Sweden. Uh, or I mean, even you can have an artist that's just known in his village with 5,000 people, but those 5,000 people might be interested in supporting him somehow. There's like, okay, let's create that framework. So it's not just about the Bored Apes and the punks. It's more about anyone that wants to create anything. And that could be a person with a fan base of 500 people. If every person gives him $10 a month, well,
yeah, totally.
that's so he can maybe work a few hours less in his ordinary job, and pursue his dream. So I think that's the kind of framework we're working with, and the mindset we're working with, that culture needs to be local somehow, or localized. um, so yeah, I think yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I totally see that, right? And we're already seeing models of those evolve, right? So you're seeing what I think we call now, I know we're calling community-owned organizations, right? So, and that ownership can be represented in the form of an NFT. So it's like a membership, a club, right? Or a partnership, or that loyalty card to a coffee
Yeah.
shop. And it could be community owned, right? Because we all bought
Uh,
that NFT. We think that coffee needs to be that much, or it should have that chocolate cake. So I want to support that chocolate cake with a specific NFT. And I always get
yeah.
one for, or I get it at 10% discount or something
Yeah.
like that, right?
No,
And so those
definitely.
are great ways. Yeah.
And I mean, as you're saying as well, imagine if we did, it was community owned, and during Corona, when everything's shutting down, then it's not just one person's issue or problem to how do we stay alive. It's the community's issue or the problem, and you create loyal customers or loyal
Yeah,
owners,
exactly.
basically, so they can all kind of come together and trying to solve things. So I think that community. This whole sense of community and sense of ownership is something that I think, even though the metaverse is around the corner, I do think that it's going to be a few years away. Um,
But I
so
do think, to your point, right? You mentioned globalization, and if I go online into the metaverse, I can automatically touch into people anywhere on the planet, right? I don't even know where they are. I may not even know who necessarily is behind that, but we're coming together for a common interest, right? And that could be we're going into a specific environment inside the metaverse. We are on the Ethereum blockchain, so we all believe in the Ethereum protocol. And so all of a sudden there's a shift between this global model, yet on the other hand, there's also a shift between being hyper local, right? I really, in my community, what impacts me from a physical environment, yet on the other hand, how do I find people that share this one common interest that I have that is very few people locally, yet on a global basis, there's a large community and I can have very stimulating conversations around that specific topic that maybe nobody's interested in, or
I think
fewer
that's,
people
yeah.
in the local level are interested in, right?
I think that's super, super crucial actually for
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of how I felt. If I look at my first kind of like crypto buddies
yeah,
that are now my
yeah,
real buddies, they were kind of
yeah,
like I spent most of my time chatting with them on Telegram. It wasn't like I met
yeah,
them in real life. I met them on forums. So it's
yeah,
and they were, they were kind of at the same depth in the rabbit hole as I was.
yeah.
So we could, talk about the same interest because no one else was interested in talking about those things.
Yeah,
So they were like, "Oh, this is great. I'm actually feeling." It's such a big exchange here. I learn a lot. These are the things I can't speak to with my peers, my physical peers. So
yeah,
definitely. I agree. I agree. I mean, you and I, we
yeah,
spend more time on Zoom or phone calls or Telegram than we do in real life.
yeah.
And so, yeah,
Yeah, somebody was saying that it's super interesting how you build these relationships through forums and through anonymous maybe environments, and you build great friends. You build really great friends that you maybe meet for the first time at a conference somewhere, where this interest group gathers and comes together, right? So you've got great friends that you meet for the first time, and usually it's always been the other way around, right? You have friends that you've met all the time, and you go to the pub together and talk to,
yeah,
or at
yeah,
work alongside each other, right? So it's like
yeah,
an interesting the
yeah.
switch in how established relationships get established.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Yeah,
think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you're younger, your parents decide who you basically hang out with. Their
yeah,
decision on where to live is who the people you can pick from.
yeah,
And then you start, I mean, elementary school is still their choice, but then you start
yeah.
university. That's like, okay, you hopefully made your decision on
So
what you're interested in. You're
yeah,
interested in engineering with a lot of engineers now, but engineering is so broad. So
yeah,
then you start a job and you're like, okay,
yeah,
I started this job, but like in the engineering department is only 4 people and we're like 100 people in this company. Then all of a sudden you feel alone. You're like, where's the rest of my crew? So
yeah,
then you start looking into interests and then you go online and you find this forum with 1,000 engineers that all
yeah,
want to talk about the same thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that like interest has always been a vertical on how we make friends, and
yeah.
it's a good thing because I mean it's a very
Definitely.
accurate vertical to pick your friends from because if you have the same interest, if you're into crypto, there's a lot of other stuff you're also probably into,
Yeah,
and then the barriers of building a rapport or a conversation, whatever, lowers a lot. So yeah, I think. That's one of the great things of, I guess, with the internet, and it's been around for a while. But yeah, so
and I think that really has also allowed, and with crypto coming in and a currency coming in, so all of a sudden we can have forums and interactions on a global basis. But now all of a sudden we can, thanks to cryptocurrencies, have a trade relationship in a digital environment, transpiring different borders and geographies with each other, which in my view is really what is allowing us to connect with each other more, because there's an economic exchange as well, which then creates communication. And with that exchange, after the communication, comes a level of happiness and experience with each other that again fosters tighter relationships across these different borders and geographies, and a
Yeah.
deeper understanding for the different cultures, the different interests, etc., of people around the world.
Definitely. I think what you're saying here is about it's so crucial that the
Yeah,
cryptocurrency actually matters. Cryptocurrency aligns the interests. I sometimes get a bit provoked by people saying,
talkative, right?
is people saying, I'm into blockchain, I'm not really into cryptocurrencies. I'm like,
Yeah.
you haven't
How's that
understood which,
possible?
like, how's that even possible? So, I mean, the currency kind of aligns the interests and builds something that is community driven.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, imagine trying to build Bitcoin without the small b. You just have the network. It's like, good luck.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Exactly. It would never have grown to where it is today without the small, without the bitcoins themselves,
yeah,
the
yeah,
currency, right?
yeah,
Yeah, totally
exactly.
agree.
Yeah, yeah. So what are you
And
up to right now? It's what's taking most of your time?
yeah, look, I'm sort of working on Laguna Labs, and we
Yeah.
launched TrustedNode.io, which is really providing retail investors the ability to earn rewards and in with coins they love, in coins they
Mm,
love, right? So if you're
mm,
sitting on coins you love, how do I earn rewards for those coins I love in those coins I love, right? And today you can stake them in a on secure infrastructure validator nodes, and you can earn anywhere between 12 up to maybe even 100% APY for
mm.
helping secure those specific blockchains, and make sure that that infrastructure works. And that's been super interesting. We launched it maybe 4 months ago. So we've been building on it for a while, and the utility features are really now coming to shine. So we're really happy with that, and 200 million TVL already, right, within a 4 month
Wow.
period.
Wow.
So that was really, yeah, super exciting to see how that's been responding. The token price hasn't reflected that yet, but
Yeah.
that's usually,
Yeah.
we launched unfortunately in a down market. So at some point the market will realize we're building.
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough to raise sufficient money in the private sale that allowed us to get to where we are today, and I think we can easily go for another period of time. So excited with that.
What are your
And then we
thoughts
launched Truf.
on,
Sorry.
sorry, go on.
No.
Next question. What are your thoughts? Because I know you're working on Truflation.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, like, what happens in a world when we have no idea what the actual inflation is, where everything is just manipulated? What happens? Like, where are we going with this? Uh, I mean,
That's a super good. I mean, I personally think that the world is going more and more crypto, right? And so our validator nodes are going to be the savings bank, if you will, for people that want to hold on to their crypto, keep it safely, yet still earn money with that. Number one. Number two is with the fiat world. When COVID happened, the government started printing money like crazy, and it was transitory, right? So it's just transitory,
mm,
number one. And number two is they came up with the argument MMT, modern money theory. What is modern money theory? And basically the concept behind that is we can expand and retract money from the market instantaneously. So if we print 3 trillion, we can pull that out of the market really quickly. And we can do that because we are a monopoly, right?
mm,
And so in a way, in a sense, that is accurate. And I think they can possibly try and do that. But unfortunately, there is not necessarily that monopoly situation now, especially with crypto growing. I mean, bear in mind, crypto is only a $2 trillion industry versus the real estate industry,
yeah,
$1 trillion industry, the gold $10 trillion, the stock market another $300 trillion, and then derivatives is another quadrillion trillion dollars. So
yeah,
they
exactly.
are
Yeah,
still the monopoly in terms of minting and managing money as it's out there. But I think the confidence, the trust is all slowly crumbling away because of increased regulatory framework, and if you suffer phomophobia like I do, or we don't want to tackle that and work with that. If you suffer if you're in Canada and you're a trucker and then all of a sudden they just snatch your money away, you cannot access it from a bank account. That of course creates another level of uncertainty. If you're in Ukraine and you unfortunately are born with a situation where you're in war, the banks shut down, you have no access to money, how do you pay for goods? Crypto can be really handy, particularly non-custodial wallets. If you're in Turkey, you've experienced a lot of inflation, price fluctuation. Crypto can be super stabilizing, right? If you're in Russia, you're going through. Yeah, go ahead.
How does Truflation? Because how does Truflation work? You have a basket. Like, what is the setup?
So we then sort of looked at that and sort of said, how I just can't believe that Truflation is 7% or inflation is 7%. So how can we create true indexes that represent a basket and a scenario that's out there? And so we looked at the inflation model. Number one, it's built on 1920s framework. So we're now in 2020, so a whole century later, and we're still working off the same framework from back then when there were no computers, no mobile phones, etc. And so let's take a developer approach to this. Let's look at the basket. So they publish the basket, but they don't actually publish how they allocate the weighting to the product. We fulfilled that by about 80% with a developer mindset where we could go out in real time, either scrape from websites or pull from APIs, all of these different data sets as it relates to the items in the basket. And food, rent is not included in CPI, funny enough. So we included it. Why? Because 30% of the household expenditure is actually rent. 18% is transportation. How do we get the different transportation prices? And then you have health, and you have education. And so you have all these elements that are in that basket. We aggregate that and then publish what we aggregate, where we aggregate it from. And we have multiple sources for each of the individual items. Not all of the items, but individual items. And then we have an algorithm that does the weighting across all of those. Those are then going to be published, and the DAO can then elect what and how the weighting should be used. And then the debate is no longer full news, right news, that's good news, that's bad news. But the debate is then around the scientific algorithm that is used to evaluate the 5 different sources of car prices. How do we weight which one? And then how do we put an output? This is the average car price that is used, right? And then we do that on and on across multiple different products. And we pump that out as true CPI. And then we're trying to do that same model across multiple different categories, right? So we already take commodities price, true commodity index on a global basis or on a local basis. You have true real estate pricing, right? So we don't go to the registry. We actually go to all the Zillows, the Trulias, the Airbnbs, pull that information and come up with a true real estate, true NFT pricing, true NFT index, true Metaverse index. How can we build out these models and make them available? So it's
super interesting. It's as always an ambitious project, which I obviously love. So
we're lucky to have a really good team. We got 12 people now working on this: data scientists, data architects, data product developers. And then Solidity managers, Solidity engineers, and so it's good. It's fun.
And what do you kind of like vision to be the kind of the final product? What's the how do people interact with it? Is it gonna be entities? It's gonna be organization? Like, who will interact with it? Like, what's the final vision there?
So the final vision is, for example, you go to the supermarket, you buy your eggs, you take a picture of your eggs. This is how much I paid, $3 for my eggs. I submit it into some server that then feeds it into the calculation. You get paid in the true tokens for having contributed. So proof of contribution has been achieved, and then that contribution then goes into the mix that you can then go and see what your inflation was for eggs. So you buy, that's one example. So the actual consumer of the data is actually feeding in the price of the products that they're then supporting with the data that they're consuming. Number one. So you have a virtuous cycle around that.
Yeah.
The other thing, so that's really the ultimate end goal that we like, but also how can we create customized indexes, right? So you today with services like a Genie or a Mint, you can actually see the portfolio of your household expenditure, how much you're spending in entertainment, how much in transportation, in food, grocery shopping, etc., based on your credit card bills or your bank account that you're connecting to these services. And then they give you a nice pie chart. What is your personal inflation based on that pie chart? How can we provide you with that insight so that you can then go into your next negotiation when you're working or looking to plan your next project or your next contract or your next engagement to get paid an additional 10, 12, 50% based on the actual true inflation that you're experiencing based on your personal expenses.
Like it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's really cool. I think it's useful. I just the fact that I feel like maybe has been like a COVID thing, but I feel like people are waking up to inflation for the first time in a very long time. I feel like people didn't really talk about inflation, or maybe I've changed kind of the people I hang out with, but like 10 years ago, or maybe I've matured and I realized that, oh, we need to just buy hard assets or something because the inflation is just crazy. But I honestly think even in Sweden, which the central bank here keeps saying that we have 2% inflation, even people here in Sweden are kind of questioning them. The central bank actually came out like 2-3 weeks ago saying that we think we have around 2.2% inflation, but we've excluded energy consumption as well from it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, well, how many things can you exclude from a like transportation, energy, and living expenses? Like, well, I mean, of course, there's no inflation. If you're going to exclude all the big chunks of costs, anything,
there's no inflation.
Yeah, it's silly. It's silly, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is what
So
it is,
one thing that what we learned is when we studied all of these inflation indexes around the world is at least in sort of the major economies, what they've done is they created this basket and they built a census model, right? So they went out and saying these 20 households represent the 80 million across the US, for example, right? And they built all of their models off these 20 households, or maybe they're 20,000, or I don't know the exact number because they don't publish that. But off the back of that, they then go and say, okay, so that's the model that they've used. And then they've gone and said, these are the basket items. And then they switched it to what they call a lifestyle approach. So if you like meat, they can then say, oh, chicken, steak, pork, beef, sausages, so, oh, chicken went up. Oh, let's exclude chicken and let's go with beef because beef stayed consistent. So we'll just calculate beef as the meat category, for example, right? And so they've nuanced it really well.
Did you find any, when in your studies, did you find any kind of countries that were doing a good job? Like they were like, oh, these are actually pretty good. Like these are pretty fair.
I mean, usually it was the smaller countries that were actually trying to provide a better insight. But to be honest, most Western countries and even most countries are very nebulous, right? And any country, I haven't actually found, it was really the countries that are already huge inflation and it, right? And they don't rely on the dollar anyway in those countries, right? So in their mindset, they're trading in dollar or euro or In Europe, it was usually the Deutschmark, which was the stable coin, right? Which, if you will. And so, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, in crypto, we've done the same model. We've just created the stable coins, right? We've given them a name, right? And if you were, I remember when I would go to Czechoslovakia or Turkey, everybody would be thinking in Deutschmark, right? Or euros. Why?
Yeah.
Because that was the stable coin, whereas my
Yeah.
inherent the native currency was, oh, it was going to fluctuate. It was so volatile. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure, right? And so
Yeah.
we did the same in crypto land.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funny.
Huh. Yeah.
Oh, anyway. But yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity in this new world as we go, global. And I think you are focused also on identifying what demands are there going to be from this Web 2 generation as they come into Web 3. Who are the fintech users out there today? What are they looking for in DeFi, for example, right? Why fintech? Why not DeFi? Oh, fintech, I get 5% APY maybe, which is more than TradFi, where I get 0.5%. But in DeFi, I get 20% or 18%. Ooh, over time, I think there's going to be that migration. How do you see that? And what's your thoughts in that space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as soon as you start moving from, as you said, TradFi and then fintech and then into DeFi, when you start creating let's say DeFi protocols and you're saying, let's play with the idea that you and I, we set up a company and then we say okay, deposit your USD here and we'll give you a 20% APY. It's okay, 20% API, is that even possible? Then you and I, let's say we go UST with Luna
Yeah.
and Terra. I know you
Yeah.
like them, so so let's say we go there. We go to Anchor Protocol. Okay, they're giving
Yeah.
us 19%, and they're okay, but can we risk taking someone's money and then losing it in either the
Yep.
UST unpegs or Anchor gets
Attack
hacked or
or
whatever? So we're
yeah.
okay, we need to find insurance products now. And then we start looking at insurance products. Okay, can we have double insurance? So I think the more we the more people start experimenting and onboarding people, they realize, okay, we need to have some sort of security, because I wouldn't be comfortable starting let's say an app with a limited company that would take on people's money and then something happens in a third, something that I don't control, and
Yeah.
I lose my stuff and the
Yeah.
customer loses its wealth. So I think the more real life use cases are developed, I think the more this industry evolves.
Yeah.
Now there's 3, 4 insurance companies or
Yeah.
protocols, sorry,
More.
insurance
Yeah.
protocols, or even more just on
Yeah.
Terra.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh,
evolving, and
yeah.
after a while, it's gonna be so seamless, and everything's just gonna work, the way people are used to, with the same kind of UX UI. It's not super difficult to keep track of your keys. It's a familiar environment, but instead of just getting the APY, maybe you're also getting a part of the protocol or the company that you're supporting you know, uh, by staking your wealth there. So, yeah, I'm super excited about it. Honestly, I think it's pretty early. I wouldn't. Let's say someone told me I have $100 million, give me 20% APY. I don't. You know what I mean? It's not like. Would you put 100 million into Anchor today?
Yeah, I think today, I would definitely feel comfortable with doing that. And, it's so funny. I actually spoke to somebody the
Sorry,
other day and,
just to clarify, 100 million of someone else's money into Anchor.
ooh, yeah,
That-
yeah, yeah.
That's the
That's a
thing.
very,
You,
that's the
you,
right
I mean,
question to ask.
you're on the risk spectrum. So,
Yeah,
you like calculated risk, but
yeah,
some people don't even want risk. They're yeah.
yeah,
So that's kind of my thing here. Do I trust? then again, like, do I trust, if I have $100 million, do I put that into a bank account? Well,
Yeah.
that's the option I have today, or I just buy Bitcoin. So
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I was talking to somebody the other day. I mean, and this is the first time I heard somebody put 10 million phantoms into Tomb Finance. And it's like, wow, that's times $2. That's 20 million US dollars into Tomb Finance, which to me I thought was like super. I mean, even for me, a calculated risk, right? That was like, wow, bulls, man, bulls on you.
yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, I personally try to not, I mean, I can dabble, but I try not to take default risk.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
anything, so when someone says like, yeah, you could put your Bitcoin into, to BlockFi and get a few percent or whatever. I mean, I understand the idea of it, and I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine with me. But I
that's
just
good.
feel
Yeah,
like with 5% interest, but you then have a default risk. You have the risk of losing everything.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't see the risk reward there,
yeah,
because then I can go just buy some pref stocks and get 8
yeah.
10%. Sure, it's not on Bitcoin, but still. So I don't know. I'm torn. Sometimes I feel very exotic in my risk calculations, but sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I just I think there's
But
it's levels, I guess. I don't know. What are your thoughts on
exactly,
that?
and I think that's the beauty of all of this, right? I mean, in a way, you have the right to choose, and there is a choice out there for every risk profile, right? Some people super risky, some less risky, some
Mhm.
medium risky, right? And so across that spectrum, I can now play with all these different products, and ultimately, the higher the risk, the higher the rewards, but also, the likely of losing everything or 90% of it or something like that, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think that's the beauty, that choice, right? I love that choice. Yeah, look, guys, thank you. Vahid Toosi, founder of HODL, a SPAC listed, Scandinavia, innovation, crypto, Nifties, NFT.se, and all of the Scandinavian URLs. Thank you super much. I really, we always have great conversations, so just love these conversations
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
hope the audience finds it and maybe they give us some comments down below and we'll find out what they say.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me on, and see you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Take
Oh,
care,
there's
man.
Dubai coming up, right? There's the
Oh yeah.
Dubai
Yeah.
Blockchain Week, right?
Yeah. I think I'm going on Friday in a week
Yeah.
from now.
Yeah.
There's a launch of a new game that I find very interesting, actually. So we'll see. We'll see. Time will tell.
Ooh, actually, I have an interesting game I might share with you. I just met a really cool development team. They came up from the mobile era and really solid background. So I'll share that with you as well. If I know you're into the gaming space as well a lot. So
Like it. Like it. Okay. Cool,
thank
man.
you, Vahid Toosi.
Thank you.
Great,
Take care. See you.
always.
Chat later. Bye.